Welcome, dear listener. We're so glad you're here. In a world full of noise and distractions, thank you for choosing to pause and spend these next few minutes with us. Today's story is one of love, loss, and the kind of unexpected courage that changes lives forever. So sit back, open your heart, and let yourself be drawn into a journey that just might stay with you long after the video ends. Let's begin. A boy whispered, "Please don't let them take her," and it broke his heart. Nicholas Grant was a man of schedules and structure. At 42, he had built a name for himself as a sharp, unshakable financial strategist in downtown Chicago. His life ran like a clock, every minute accounted for, every hour booked. He wore tailored suits, walked with purpose, and rarely, if ever, looked up from his phone while walking down the street. But on this chilly Tuesday morning in early October, something happened that would bring all of that to a sudden stop. He had just stepped out of a taxi, a leather briefcase in one hand, and a coffee in the other. His next meeting was only 10 minutes away, one that could close a multi-million-dollar deal for a tech investment firm he'd been courting for months. His thoughts were locked in numbers, projections, and negotiating strategies. That is, until he heard a voice, small, cracked, and pleading, rise just above the buzz of city traffic. "Please take my baby sister. She's really hungry." Nicholas stopped mid-step. The voice hadn't come from someone trying to sell something or ask for change. It wasn't aggressive or loud. It was raw, vulnerable, and unmistakably full of fear. He turned his head and saw a young boy standing near a rusted fire hydrant. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old. He had a thin frame, dirt smudged across his cheeks, and wore an oversized hoodie that hung off one shoulder. But what struck Nicholas most wasn't the boy's appearance. It was what he was holding. In his small, trembling arms was a baby girl, maybe 5 months old, wrapped tightly in a tattered pink blanket. Her tiny face peeked out just enough to show flushed cheeks and watery eyes. She whimpered softly, and the boy adjusted his grip to hold her closer to his chest. His lips quivered as he looked up at Nicholas. "I've been here since yesterday," he said, voice barely audible. "She hasn't had anything to eat." Nicholas felt a strange stillness settle over him. For a moment the city noise faded. The honking, the chatter, the rush of tires against wet pavement, all of it blurred. As he locked eyes with the child, every instinct in him screamed to move on, to call someone, to not get involved. But something in that boy's gaze, in the way he held the baby, pierced through the wall Nicholas had spent years building around his heart. He didn't know their names. He didn't know their story. But he knew, with a sudden clarity, that he couldn't walk away. And in that moment, on a busy corner of Clark Street in the middle of his tightly wound life, Nicholas Grant took his first step off the path he knew, and onto one that would change him forever. Nicholas didn't speak at first. He simply crouched down to the boy's level, set his coffee aside, and gently asked, "What's your name, buddy?" The boy hesitated. His arms tightened around the baby, who gave a soft cry in response. "Caleb," he said. "And this is Lila. She's my baby sister." Nicholas glanced at the girl again, red cheeks, glassy eyes, and lips dry from dehydration. Caleb looked exhausted, his shoulders drooping from the weight of both his sister and whatever storm they'd been through. There were no adults in sight. No stroller, no bags, no signs of where they might have come from. Just two kids, abandoned on a corner in the middle of a sprawling city. "Where's your mom?" Nicholas asked softly. "She said she'd be back yesterday," Caleb whispered, "but she never came back." Nicholas stood, heart pounding. He looked down the street, half expecting someone to come running up, claiming the children. But no one did. The crowds passed by like usual, heads down, earbuds in, too busy to see what was unfolding at the edge of the sidewalk. He pulled out his phone and hesitated. His thumb hovered over the screen. His instinct told him to call someone. Child Protective Services, maybe the police, but then Caleb flinched at the sight of the phone. "Please, don't call them," the boy begged. "They'll take her away. I can take care of her. I promise." It was that word, promise, that struck Nicholas the hardest. Not because Caleb said it, but because of how he said it. Like someone who had been making grown-up promises for far too long. Like someone who knew what it felt like to be left behind, and had decided he'd never let it happen to her. Nicholas tucked the phone away. "All right," he said. "How about we get you both something to eat first?" Caleb nodded, eyes wide with both hope and uncertainty. Nicholas led them to a small diner 2 blocks away. It was nothing fancy. Red booths, silver napkin holders, the kind of place that served pancakes all day. Caleb devoured a turkey sandwich like it was the first real food he'd had in days. Lila squirmed in Nicholas's arms as he fed her a bottle he'd picked up from the corner pharmacy. He watched them carefully, Caleb's cautious eyes darting toward the door every time it opened, Lila's tiny fingers wrapping around his thumb. Something in Nicholas shifted. He felt it in his chest like a thread being pulled loose. He picked up his phone again. This time he dialed someone else, his assistant. "Cancel my meetings," he said flatly. "All of them?" "Yes," he replied, eyes still on the kids. "Today, tomorrow, until further notice." And in that moment, Nicholas Grant, a man whose life was once ruled by contracts and deadlines, broke his own rules. Because no deal in the world could matter more than the 2 fragile lives sitting across the table from him. Nicholas had always considered his apartment a fortress of solitude, 35 floors above the noise of the city, filled with modern furniture, muted colors, and silence. It wasn't designed for kids, it wasn't designed for life. But as he held Lila in one arm and guided Caleb through the sleek glass doors of the building, something about it all suddenly felt temporary. Caleb clutched his backpack, which barely had anything inside, and looked around the marble lobby like it was another planet. His steps were hesitant, his eyes fixed on the elevator doors as if expecting them to vanish before opening. When they reached the apartment, the boy froze just inside the doorway. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that looked more like art than comfort. It was a far cry from wherever they had come from. "You can take your shoes off if you want," Nicholas offered, trying to sound casual. Caleb didn't move. Instead, he looked down at his sneakers, which were worn thin, soles nearly peeling. "They're not that dirty," he mumbled. Nicholas knelt beside him. "You're fine, kid. Come on in. This is your space too, for now." They spent the next hour fumbling through an entirely new routine. Nicholas had no idea how to mix formula, didn't know what temperature a baby's bottle should be, and definitely didn't own diapers. A second trip to the pharmacy fixed some of that, but not his nerves. Lila cried. Caleb stayed silent. The apartment, usually so calm, now pulsed with the weight of uncertainty. Nicholas laid Lila down on a towel in the living room and attempted to rock her gently. She wailed louder. "What am I doing wrong?" He muttered under his breath. "Here," Caleb said softly. He knelt beside his sister, lifted her carefully, and began to hum, a tune so low and gentle it barely rose above a whisper. Lila quieted almost instantly, her tiny hand curling against his chest. Nicholas stared, stunned. "You've done that before," he said. Caleb nodded, still rocking. "Every night, since she was born." The weight of that sentence hit Nicholas like a gut punch. He wasn't just watching a boy comfort his sister. He was watching a child step into the role of a parent. It wasn't just sad, it was wrong. Caleb deserved to be a kid, to worry about baseball and school lunches, not formula measurements and fever checks. Later that night, as the city lights blinked below and Lila finally slept in a borrowed crib, Nicholas stood in the hallway watching Caleb draw quietly on a sketch pad. He wasn't doodling superheroes or race cars, he was drawing her, his sister, sleeping, peaceful, safe. Nicholas felt something shift deep inside him. He didn't know what tomorrow held. He didn't have a plan. But for the first time in a very long time, he knew this. He couldn't send them away. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed were a blur of formula bottles, microwave dinners, and middle-of-the-night diaper changes. Nicholas stumbled through it all like a man thrown into a world he had never trained for. But somehow, he kept showing up. Every morning, he made pancakes shaped like smiley faces, Every night, he read bedtime stories he hadn't thought about since childhood. And every hour in between, he found himself watching Caleb with a kind of quiet admiration. The boy was only 8, but he carried himself like someone twice his age. He checked on Lila constantly, memorized her feeding schedule, and gently corrected Nicholas when he did something wrong, but never in a rude way. It wasn't that Caleb didn't trust him. It was just that he was used to being the one in charge, the only one. Then, on the 5th day, the call came. Nicholas was in the kitchen reheating soup when his phone lit up. The name on the screen made his stomach tighten. Janelle Morrison, the social worker. He stepped into the hallway and answered. "We found their mother," Janelle said, her voice even but cautious. "She's alive, but she's in rough shape. Currently in a rehab center. Methamphetamine use, severe malnourishment. She's not stable, physically or mentally." Nicholas leaned against the wall, the phone pressed tight to his ear. "What does that mean for the kids?" he asked. There was a pause on the other end. "If she completes treatment and proves she can safely parent, she'll get custody back. If not, the state will look for a permanent solution, foster care or adoption. Unless what?" Nicholas asked, though he already sensed where this was headed. "Unless someone like you steps in formally. Guardianship, possibly adoption, but that's a big step. I just wanted to give you a heads up before we move forward with any official placement." He ended the call and stood there in silence. The hallway felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in. His mind ran wild. Legal papers, background checks, home visits. Could he even do this? Later that evening, Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring quietly while Lila napped nearby. The TV buzzed in the background, but the room felt strangely still. Nicholas walked over and sat beside him. "Hey," he said gently. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb didn't look up. "You're sending us back, aren't you?" The words hit Nicholas like a slap. He hadn't even said anything yet, but Caleb already knew how the system worked. He knew the pattern. People come, people go. "No," Nicholas said firmly. "I don't want to send you anywhere." Caleb finally looked up. His eyes were glassy, uncertain. "But will we be left again?" Nicholas didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around the boy's thin shoulders and pulled him close. "Not if I can help it. I promise you that." And this time, when he said it, he meant every word. The decision wasn't made overnight. Nicholas spent the next few days lying awake long after the kids had gone to sleep, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man he was becoming. He never wanted to be a father. In fact, after the loss of his younger sister years ago, he'd made peace with the idea that his life would be about business, not family. But now there were small shoes by the front door. A baby's laugh echoing through his apartment. A child's drawing of Mr. Nick taped to the fridge. He couldn't imagine going back to how things were, so he called Janelle. "I want to file for legal guardianship," he said without hesitation. "Not temporary, full, all the way." There was a long pause on the line. "Are you sure, Nicholas?" "This is permanent, I'm sure," he said. "They're already home." And so began the process. It was more than just paperwork. It was background checks, court dates, home inspections, and deeply personal interviews. Social workers asked questions he'd never asked himself. Why now? What made you step in? Are you emotionally prepared for this? He didn't always have perfect answers, but he had the one that mattered. Because I love them. Months passed. Nicholas traded boardroom meetings for bedtime stories. He learned how to pack lunch boxes, how to fold impossibly small laundry, and how to soothe a teething baby at 2 a.m. It wasn't easy. Some days, it felt impossible. But then Caleb would smile, or Lila would reach for him, and suddenly, everything made sense. When the adoption was finalized that spring, Nicholas stood in a courthouse holding Lila in one arm, Caleb beside him in a button-up shirt that was just a little too big. The judge signed the papers with a quiet smile. "Congratulations," she said. "You're a father." Those 3 words hit harder than any promotion, any pay raise, any deal he had ever closed. It was official. But the truth was, it had felt official for a long time. Shortly after the court date, Nicholas moved them all out of the high-rise and into a cozy two-story home in upstate New York. It had a wraparound porch, a big backyard, and a maple tree just begging for a tire swing. There were birds in the morning, stars at night, and peace in the spaces between. Caleb blossomed. He joined the neighborhood soccer team, made friends at school, and started calling Nicholas Dad without hesitation. Lila took her first steps on the back patio and said, "Dada," with a giggle that melted his heart. Nicholas had stepped into this journey expecting to help someone else, but somewhere along the way, he realized he'd been the one rescued. Not from danger, but from emptiness. This wasn't the life he planned, but it was the one he was always meant for. What would you have done if you were in Nicholas's shoes? This story isn't just about unexpected fatherhood. It's about human connection, compassion, and the quiet moments that can change everything. We want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever made a split-second decision that altered the course of your life? Have you ever opened your heart to someone when the world told you to walk away? Tell us in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Did Caleb's courage or Nicholas's transformation move something inside you? And most importantly, where are you watching from? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments so we can see how far this story has reached. Whether you're a parent, a guardian, or someone who simply experienced love in an unexpected form, we'd love to hear your reflections. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. We're sharing more powerful, real-life inspired stories like this every day. Your comment might even inspire someone else who's going through a difficult time. So let's start a conversation, one built on kindness, empathy, and the belief that family is sometimes found in the most unexpected places.